First of all, what I want to talk about a little bit here is father absence. This has been hotly debated, talked about across our state. We've got organizations like, let's read them off to you, the National Fatherhood Initiative, the Illinois Fatherhood Initiative, which I happen to be on the board of, the Illinois Council on Responsible Fatherhood, that the Illinois Fatherhood Initiative belongs to, the Fathers Who Care organization and conference, which I attended just a couple of weeks ago in Chicago at Malcolm X College, a well-attended conference. Illinois Fathers, who we have here today. And just a couple of days ago, we had a House subcommittee on fatherhood in the U.S. Congress. Lots of testimony. So, obviously, the state of Illinois and our country is very concerned about fatherhood. And they're spending a lot of time and money trying to figure out how do we get fathers more engaged with their children. And why is that? Because they know from the studies, and that's obvious, we all know as people anyway, it's common sense, that the more fathers are involved with their children, they show up as being more mature in their judgment. They show up as having better school performance. They have better marriages and more stable marriages later on. The more fathers are involved with them. So this isn't debatable any longer. This is why all these organizations are plowing time and money, energy into this. However, we've got some strange contradictions here. We've got research that one of my board members here, Robert Farrar, has surfaced that show that the percentage of fathers becoming disengaged, dropping out, or not seeing their children for whatever reason after divorce or separation is actually increasing. So we've got studies on the one hand that everybody knows they exist and that everybody knows as a fact that fathers are more involved with parenting today, much more so than they were 30 years ago. The percentage of involvement, the percentage of fathers, all this is way up. And yet, after divorce or after separation, we have an increasing percentage of those fathers not being involved with their children or not seeing their kids. So let's talk about that. That's what I'm here today. I want to talk about this a little bit. All right. Most people out there, of course, are going to view that as a matter of choice. They're going to say, well, see, that's the problem. We just got to talk to these fathers. We just got to convince them to be more involved with their children. They just don't have common sense. They just don't know what's good for their kids. You know, that reminds me of some of the attitudes we had in this country back in the 1950s toward certain ethnic groups where we just thought they just didn't want to work very hard. We had those kinds of viewpoints, didn't we? Wasn't that true back then? All right? And we've since learned we were sending a lot of signals that pushed those people down and that made them feel like they didn't have a shot at getting anywhere anyway. So why even bother? They were being pushed aside. I submit to you today, we are still sending signals like that to fathers, and we don't seem to recognize that, and we need to change that. So what kind of negative messaging are we sending to fathers that may be part of why there's less father involvement after separation when we want it to go the other direction? Well, first of all, the negative messaging, some of it emanates from our court systems, our attorneys, and our GALs. Children's Rights Council of Illinois has attended every meeting but one over the last 2.5 years of the Illinois Recommendations Committee for Family Law, the Illinois Family Law Study Committee, which meets in Chicago on a monthly basis. And through that, through our participation on the sidelines, our observation of those committee meetings, we've gotten to know a number of people on that committee. And many of them are attorneys and some are judges. We've also met with off-site and in other parts of Illinois with other judges and GALs and judges. We've talked to them. And we find that not all of them, thankfully, but many of them don't seem to realize that if you take a father who is typically the father today, like this father walking right here, fathers with these children, who is with his children every day. Every day he's reading to them at night. Every day he's helping them say their prayers. Every night, on school nights, he's helping them do their homework. In the morning, he's helping take them to school. This is a typical father. And you take that father from that level of involvement and his children to 4 overnights out of a month, which is the bottom line, the kind of the judicial presumption that we work from in Illinois. And you have effectively made an uncle out of a father. And guess what, folks? Dads don't want to be uncles to their own children. They want to be fathers. Right? So this is one of the problems. And what kind of a message does that send to fathers today? That this is the judgment of our society. Our courts are viewed as reflective of our society and their viewpoint. What kind of a message does it send if you say, well, the most a child really needs to be involved with a father? I mean, the bottom line, the absolute minimum, is 4 overnights out of a month. Gee, with a message like that, I guess most fathers really aren't harming their children if they go on business travel for 26 overnights out of a month. Would you believe that? I wouldn't believe that. I don't think most child development specialists would believe that. Referring to this number of overnights is only befitting of a disinterested father. So the message we're sending is, you're disinterested. We're presuming you're a disinterested father. And I talk to judges, I talk to attorneys, I go, Mike, all they got to do is come into our courtroom and subpoena 4 or 5 witnesses from your community, and maybe spend what? $10,000 on attorney fees? That's all you got to do. Sure, it's just like a walk in the park to show up in a courtroom, go up against the person who's got your child for 26 overnights out of the month, and pay $300 or $400 an hour for an attorney. You know, there was a reporter in the Boston Globe addressed this several years ago, interviewing and also interviewed fathers and families out there, and Dr. Ned Holston on this issue. And that reporter said something that was very astute. She said, it's almost a badge that you're upper middle class in Massachusetts if you've got shared parenting with your child. Because that meant you had enough money, you could afford the court costs to go in there and prove to a judge that you were not a disinterested father. Even though we just had a study reported by Columbia University at that House subcommittee just 2 days ago that said even in the case of unmarried fathers, who are oftentimes viewed negatively in our society, even in their case, 80% of them are present at the birth of their child. Think about that. Even in the case of the unmarried fathers, of which, remember, we've got 75 to 80,000 children a year being born in our home to unmarried parents. And we're saying 80% of those, they're present at their child's birth. That's a national study. So what does that say about, our society presuming, through the court system, sending a message, a presumption, we're going to presume you're disinterested until you prove otherwise. It doesn't make sense, all right?